Hello, welcome. You are listening to Dr. Sushma Singh. Today in Unit 3 Social, Human and Gender Development, we will focus our lecture on impact of development on women. Development is not gender neutral. While one argues for the equality and participation of all human beings, men and women, in the process of development, it is important that we are not indifferent to social implications of biology and the physical constraints it puts on women. Women and development is a theme that raises issue of equality and justice for women's experience of development as mediated by both their biology and the social construction of it. Now let us discuss intensification of gender inequality. Gender inequality tends to lower productivity and efficiency of labor in all levels of the economy, not just the household, and intensifies unequal distribution of resources. Lack of security, opportunity, and an empowerment also imply the lowering of quality of life for both men and women. Even when the women and girls may bear the direct costs of gender inequality, it needs to be recognized that the ultimate cost of lack of development and poverty have to be borne by people across the society. Women's development is therefore simultaneously a gender and a developmental issue, and the developmental planners need to be cognizant of women's subordination for centuries that has controlled women's mobility, their labor, sexuality, and fertility. Now let us discuss the next point, that is mixed gain for women. As far as women are concerned, development has had mixed gains for them. While it has widened women's opportunities and opened up the public sphere to those heteros confined to the private sphere of the family life by tradition and superstitious beliefs, yet evidence from large part of the world also show that women still face disparity in opportunities, and often development for women has meant the widening of the gap between the income of men and women, and increased strain on their time and energies. Women are unfavorably represented in very large numbers in the unorganized sector where they work under oppressive and exploitative conditions, but find themselves restricted due to their biological and social responsibilities as well as the low status they enjoy in the society. Our next point is intensification of double burden. In fact, women lose twice, as the development planners have been unable to recognize the dual role of women, whereby they bear children and at the same time carry out economic activities, and have in their short-sighted definitions of women as mothers ignored and downgraded their economic functions so as to classify them as economically dependents. On the one hand, the exclusive burden of child care makes women access to the market limited, and then the market itself excludes prestigious and well-paying jobs from them, doubting their ability to hold such jobs and perform in equal capacity to men. Also, the prevalent definition of work as work when performed for money and work as work in the modern sector have also contributed to the making women's economic contributions invisible. These definitions, for instance, exclude women who work in the agricultural sector as members of a family living off farm land products, women engaged in exchange labor, household works, child care, and many such activities that are not paid. The next point is reinforcing gender role stereotypes. Stereotypes of sex roles have resulted in a situation where even developmental interventions aimed at modernizing farming systems have only exacerbated the problem by targeting only men for input such as training, loans, and resources such as seeds, land, and so on. In case of the green revolution, where there is high capitalization involved, better harvesting system have means focus on good variety of seeds and fertilizers and such mechanization that means less of labors required, thus unemployment. It is women who loses again their traditional economic employment in farms, and any alternative employment planned is done only for men. The next point is eroding women's role in traditional economy. This has widened the gap between the men and women, reducing the status of the woman. Subsistence economy with little specialization have been more equalitarian and just to women with little differentiation between the status of men and women. Civilization has created more functional specializations to the benefit of men and increasingly led to women being reduced to a dependency status as they separated from their erstwhile food production functions. Women, as they lost these functions in civilized society, increasingly became economic liabilities and the vulnerable to the host of the patriarchal controls. Anthropological evidence shows that civilization's influence on subsistence economies has meant decreased involvement of men in child rearing roles and in other household tasks. Development being largely defined in terms of economic activities has thus focused on men, ignoring women's traditional economic roles. The next point is feminization of household. Changing of customary communal land tenure system to the concept of private property ownership and the introduction of cash crops have been two important developments that eroded women's role in traditional economic system, while the favoring men and their rights over the land and crops. Also, the lure of the modern monetary economic has meant large-scale migration of men away from their households, such that women are left to perform additional tasks formerly done by men, reducing significantly women's leisure as well as the productivity. Again, improved transportation and markets have had mixed benefits for women and men. While increased access to the markets may have a positive impact on rural earnings, it also impacts people in making several traditional occupations redundant. Local handmade artifacts can seldom compete with the cheaper machine-made goods. Now let us discuss the next point, differential access to education. Since the 1980s, a phenomena called feminization of labor has been noted as a global development which refers to the process of decentralization of labor with the intention of reducing wage and non-wage costs of production. Women are preferred as employees for they are available on cheap, flexible, non-permanent terms and can be disposed of whenever it is felt necessary to do so. No doubt more women get an opportunity to work. However, that itself is not reason for any optimism, for they do such works on increasingly less favorable terms. Similarly, structural adjustment programs and new economic policy are not seen in most feminist quarters as arguing well for women who are expected to be hit the worst by inflation and the widening up of the barest of welfare state measures we have. Increased poverty with the feeble face abandonment of women and children as the poor grapple for survival. Prostitution and violence are some of the alarming social consequences that are said to be on the flip side of the economic development that is planned through the process of privatization, liberalization, and globalization. Education is widely regarded as one of the most important developmental initiatives to reduce gender disparity, and there are several researches which show positive links between the girls' education and economic productivity. Maternal and infant mortality, fertility rates, and health prospects of future generation. If we look into the education and modernization and its effects on the woman, though we find that the elite nature of education in most of the erstwhile colonial nations has meant that education has not reached rural populations, particularly women. There is still a wide gap between male and female literacy figure in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Lack of education was itself not a big problem when women engaged in traditional pursuits. However, with development and accompanying changes wherein traditional occupations of women are being suspended, it becomes difficult for poorly educated women to move into the new sectors in the market. Women come to be in a disadvantaged position because of their lack of knowledge and training, making for exploitative conditions of work and their inability to compete with more favorably disposed men. Lack of education severely limits ability to take credit, innovate, and earn independent income through economic enterprise. In case of migration to cities, rural women often find themselves in less paying jobs as domestic servants, shop assistants, and even prostitutes. Education has all the same opened up a host of occupations for the middle and upper classes, and women of these classes have found representation in services like teachers, nurses, and doctors. New job opportunities in computers and information technology have bid many a middle class woman to substantially paying job. However, it must be remembered that by and large women's economic activities are permitted to them only in situations of family crisis, when women are required to earn an additional income without changing the distribution of work at home. In countries like India, educated women often enter prestigious services due to the several factors working in their favor, of which a supportive family structure that takes pride in their education and employment, and the availability of cheap labor for taking care of household jobs are very important. At the same time, women's work outside the confines of the house is not without its problems. Divorce, separation, and increase in the number of women headed households may have a link with the increased hostility between the men and women. For while women are required to work double shift, men continues to keep off the home sphere. A related issues of the concern is the contemporary increase in violence and crime against women, which plays its function in maintaining women's subordination by restricting them from free and full participation in development initiatives. Now let us discuss the next point, which is environmental degradation and increasing hardship for women. Similarly, if we look at development and its impact on environment, we find that the destruction of the previous balance of nature through unbribed pursuit of man's capitalist interest have affected women more severely than it has men, as they struggle and search for fuel, carry water over long distances, and spend unduly long hours processing food. Women's overwhelming involvement in subsistence-related activities has meant that environmental degradation translates into special hardship for them, for the ready access to the natural resources they enjoyed earlier is replaced by working hard to get access to them, often having to pay for what was otherwise communally owned. The next point is new technology and increase in women's drudgery. The dominant discourse on development often draws women as victims of household drudgery. Technology in the form of household appliances and modern science is seen as a panacea for all trouble. However, this technology is not really all that emancipatory, for much of environmental pollution and degradation is linked to this technology. It needs to be noted that women are aware of the links between a balanced and non-graded nature and human survival, as it is women who have taken the leadership and sought solidarity across the world in their struggles against the capitalist plundering of nature and environment, be it on the issue of building large dams, the saving of mangroves forests, the building of atomic power plants, or mining chalk and other resources. This is not to say that development is not for women, rather that development interventions based on certain stereotypes of women have bypassed them. They have negatively affected their productivity and many times even created obstacles in women's life when they were actually intended to facilitate them. Development interventions have either prioritized the woman's motherhood role or her economic agency while neglecting the other half of her role, thus creating a situation wherein the women in their pursuit of development goals do not find themselves anywhere getting to be equal to the men. While they have lost the protections and advances of a sexually segregated society, they have not been able to get the freedom and status that development promised through the reinventing their economic lives. Here we want to end today's lecture. Thanks for listening.